bunker is located northwest of Steel Valley Lake, about a mile from the largest fallen tree. The tree is easy to spot. It's a dark grey most of the time, but a light grey on sunny days. Almost white. Steel Valley is an old mining town in West Virginia, although unmarked, as it was abandoned almost 200 years ago. I'm sure you can guess what the mining town was known for. I do a lot of research on old American legends. The internet is a wonderful and terrifying thing, but what I love most about it is the connections I can make with people. I used to meet people in online chat rooms back when the internet still had dial-up tones and punchy sound effects. Over the years, I learned more than a few things from programming. So, even as we have advanced in technology, many places still stick around, and my knowledge helps me find them. Old websites that should have died a long time ago are still out there, but since they weren't well known, they fell into the dark recesses of the internet. You've probably heard of some of them. I'm not talking about the dark internet, but the forgotten internet. I'm sure if more people knew about some of these websites and visited them more often, the search engines would push them forward. As it stands though, I think they should remain where they are, which is why that information will die with me. That being said, I went to one of these websites a couple of years ago. A website all about the supernatural. I browsed some old stories and posts, even interacted with the chat room to see if any familiar names might pop up. No such luck. Many of my favorite pages had stopped working. Whoever ran the websites clearly didn't get with the times. Everything looked so old. At least that made it easier for me to navigate to some familiar pages though. One such page was one that was regularly being updated. Ghost towns. My heart almost jumped when I saw the most recent post was in the same month I was looking. But then I saw the title of the post was just asking if anybody still visited the website. There were many similar posts before that. People like me feel nostalgic about the past and look up their favorite websites to see if they've grown old and fallen behind. It made me feel more than a bit sad for myself, a bad habit I was trying to get out of. Scrolling through those posts, I eventually reached a post that actually fit the theme of the page. It was titled, "I found a strange bunker in West Virginia." The post was made in 2018, which was still recent enough, in my eyes anyway. I clicked on the post, and it was pretty bare bones. Directions to a bunker, which I've written above. There was a poorly taken photo of a dead tree at the edge of a lake, and a short explanation. It was a short but detailed account of someone who was hiking. They found an old town from the early 1800s, and they stumbled across a bunker entrance, one they couldn't open. There was no picture of the town or the bunker, just this tree. Immediately, I found it odd, as it didn't make sense why he was sharing it. Usually, the posts on the website were spooky stories. The page was called Ghost Towns, after all. Yet they didn't say a thing about ghosts. It seemed more like a curiosity post, and that's all I felt looking at it. It took me a minute to read it all again before returning to the photo. I stared at it a long minute, looking for anything. I thought there might be a hidden troll face or some poorly edited ghost in the background. But no, there was nothing. I downloaded the image and I fiddled with the settings, but nothing stood out still. It was just a normal picture. It did pique my curiosity though. I live in West Virginia. If there was such a lake with a tree, I'm sure it wouldn't be too difficult to find. I could figure out some good hiking spots, look at old maps, find mining towns and so on, narrow it down a bit. I had done more research on far more obscure things. Yet, at least with those things, I had something to go on. I had stories, rumors, and all sorts of scary implications. Frustrated, I immediately dove down this rabbit hole to see what I could find. A month later, I was trudging through the forest, scouting out areas that I felt best matched the picture. The trees, the season, the time it was posted, all of these came into consideration. I had to make a few assumptions, and even then, I still had 15 locations to check. A month is a long time to obsess over something. So when I reached the point where the only thing left to do was go and see, I spent a good long time sitting on my ass, wondering if I should leave it there. But once again, I live in West Virginia. Whatever it was close enough that I couldn't let it go. Even if I found nothing, it would still be a story to tell. A bad one, a boring one even, but still, a story. The first 4 locations proved to be a dead end. The lakes were tiny spots, secluded. I didn't see any fallen grey trees or mining towns. I would mark the circled areas with a red X and move on. Some locations I could reach on foot in half an hour, and the time spent hiking wasn't bad. I listened to the sounds of nature, and I caught glimpses of wildlife skittering along the forest ground or prancing behind bushes. Even though I had not yet found anything, I didn't feel like I was wasting my time. Yet, around the 5th lake spot, the weather took a turn for the worse. Just as I was leaving, returning to the car to drive to the next area, the rain set in. It was cold enough out here without it, but it made the experience a little more miserable. I was prepared to go home, but it seemed to settle down at the next stop. The ground became a bit more spongy, rock surfaces, slippery, but not bad. I kept a jacket handy, just in case the rain started up again, and I just focused on checking out the next location. I only had so many days off, so I wanted to make the most of this. After climbing the next hill, I got a decent view of the valley. It wasn't particularly large, neither was the lake, but the forest was thick. I still took some pictures with my phone. I almost wrote it off as another dud until I noticed out of place straight edges on the phone screen. As the trees jostled in the breeze, there were some blackened structures among them, barely peeking between the branches. This had to be it, the mining town that the post had mentioned. My first stop was the town, not simply because I wanted to check it out first, but because that was the safest path towards the lake. I had walked along the edge of the hill looking for a path before finding one that navigated slowly downwards. I made good use of the jacket, just to avoid being scratched to pieces by the bushes and branches I had to go through. Eventually, I had only the thick tree coverage to contend with as I approached the town. As I said, most of the structures were blackened and ruined. The trees had grown amongst them over the years, some of them pushing against what still stood. It was more than disturbing how much of it remained. I could guess some of them were residences, but they were stacked so closely together, and the rooms seemed so small. I guess if they were just temporary residences, there was no need for the comforts of home. When I reached the end of the town, I was struck with the overwhelming feeling that someone might still be living there. I, of course, had no proof to back this up, but it's a feeling I get anytime I'm around abandoned places. Someone could be camping out, or hell, even squatting there. Crazy hobos or junkies, or this far out in the middle of nature, cannibal hermits. The human mind can construct all manner of scary things, but of course, the more plausible they happen to be, the more scared you're going to feel. At that moment, I wanted to march right out of that valley, run back to my car. But I had already walked through the dead town. I had done all this research, all this investigation to get here. The lake was just ahead. So, onwards I pressed, grateful to leave this town behind. A part of me expected the lake to have changed, but no. It looked as though I had walked straight into the picture. I had no problem spotting the fallen tree on the other side of the glass-still lake. The waters were shockingly undisturbed. Not a single ripple. Almost like it was holding its breath. The trees barely creaked, and if they did, it was the trees back the way I'd come. The silence reminded me of the deafening feeling I got when I was traveling by plane and coming into land. I was just waiting for my ears to pop. Instead, I heard the clear sounds of my footsteps as I made my way around the lake to the tree. The snaps of the twigs under my feet were comforting in that silence, but not enough to put me at ease. Once I reached the tree, I reached for the plastic compass attached to my backpack, and I held it up in the grey light the cloudy sky provided. After finding northwest, I began walking, counting my steps as I went to estimate the distance. The description, about a mile, is vague, but I assumed that I would be able to spot the bunker. The forest thinned out, and I kept an eye on the compass, looking up every now and again. After about 20 minutes of counting, I stopped. I had reached the base of one of the taller hills, and sure enough, among a cluster of rocks, I found a moss-covered stone entrance and a rusted metal door. It was not like any bunker I'd ever seen in my life. Instead of a square structure, it was pointed, like a triangle, and the door looked like it belonged in an old submarine. With all the rust and broken bolts, it certainly looked like it had been dredged up from the ocean. The first thing I did, I tried opening it, of course. The weird valve in the center was stiff, and I wondered which way was the right way, until I put all my weight on it. It made a crunching sound as it turned, suddenly halting as something snapped. I fell to the ground painfully, then checked my hands for any rust scratches. It painted my palms red and orange with tiny fragments. I had a small cut on my thumb, and as I was examining the blood, I saw the bunker door had swung open. The entrance was like a black hole, which seemed a lot more scary while I sat there, my ass in the mud and licking the blood away. I heard a steady sound. Something deep within there. But it didn't stand out right away. Until it grew louder and louder in a matter of moments. I was just easing myself back to my feet, leaning against the doorway, when something shot outside. I gasped, lost my balance again, and I fell down. Yet, because I held onto the edge, I swung against the outside of the bunker, and I faced the path I'd come from. Far ahead, I could see a figure sprinting away. Dark clothes, a mess of hair. The steady sound from within the bunker was footsteps, and there were more on the way. One by one, more of these figures ran out of the bunker and into the forest. All of them had long hair, grey with age, and they were wearing dark outfits that looked like oversized windbreakers and cargo pants. I could hear them running, but they didn't make a sound. Not a huff of breath or a yell. Nothing. Just the sound of their footsteps. What started slowly built up into a steady stream of figures scattering into the forest, running as if their lives depended on it. My heart was pounding with fear, not because of what I was seeing, but because I had a bad feeling about each one. Once these runners stopped, the silence quickly returned. A minute after that, all I could see was the forest, just as it was before I had opened the bunker. With my back to the hill, the entrance of the bunker beside me, I continued to stare in complete silence. I was frightened, not just surprised, and I was waiting for my body to approve the idea of getting up and moving. It kept on telling me to be still, to wait. Pure instinct kept me from reacting or even breathing a little too loudly. It didn't matter. The next sounds I heard were slow, almost delicate footsteps. Another man had stepped outside the bunker, but because of the angle, I could not see him. Instead of running in the direction of the forest, he walked out in front of me, steady and sure of every move he made. He was not particularly large or even scary looking. He looked to be in his 20s, clean-shaven, and his hair was youthful brown waves atop his head. He wore the same clothes as the others, but they seemed to fit him better. Dark green cargo pants, boots, a black jacket. The man's eyes focused on mine, and he squatted down in front of me. He had big eyes. He was examining me, taking in every detail. But his gaze always returned to meet mine in a moment.
"Do you know what you just did?"
he asked me.
"Or was this just a happy accident?"
I only just opened my mouth when he smiled and continued.
"An accident. I knew it,"
he said.
"It's far too soon for this. The others are eager, but they are young. You should know that the young make mistakes. You've made mistakes, and they will learn. Learn to wait. Learn to leave well enough alone. Oh, it is far too soon."
He looked absent-mindedly towards the forest, before suddenly crawling up beside me and sitting down. It scared the hell out of me. I skirted to the side so quickly, right up against the inclined side of the bunker entrance. He didn't mind. He just sat there. "What are you people?" I asked, the jolt waking up my mouth as well as my body. "What is this place?"
"Don't worry. They're coming back now,"
he said.
"It will be over in a moment. But you should probably leave before they see you. It's a miracle they did not smell you when the entrance opened. Of course, it is. And it is far too soon."
"But what does that mean?"
"It is too late for you to leave."
The man stood up suddenly, grabbed me by the wrist, and wrenched me to my feet. I don't mean he just pulled me to my feet. He hurt me, badly. When he released my arm, I held it against my chest, while a piercing pain throbbed through my body from my shoulder. It wasn't dislocated, but I definitely pulled a muscle or two.
"Stay behind me, and do not make a sound,"
he said. There was not a single care in those eyes for the pain I was feeling. He only wanted me to do what he said, for his sake. Still, I held my peace when I heard the sound of running. He turned around, backed up into me, blocking me from view. A distinct burning smell rose off him, not too different from the smell my clothes had when I sat by the fire when I went camping. Smoke and something else. Although I couldn't see, I heard them just fine. The runners had returned, piling back into the bunker. There must have been some hesitation, because the man told a couple of them to quit stalling and get inside. The pain seemed to grow worse. I wanted to buckle and cry out, give my pain some kind of outlet. Screaming would have done the trick.
"There we go,"
he said, stepping away. I fell to my knees, unable to continue. I let out a soft cry, feeling my breathing build up into full-blown panic. It hurt my heart. I was struggling with something else, a sense of worthlessness. I hated myself, my weakness. I hated to cry, but all I wanted to do was cry. It was physical and emotional pain, and it was growing worse. I wanted to call for help, and yet I didn't know who to call out to. When all strength had failed me, I fell onto my side and I wept. I opened my eyes just long enough to see the man's face before it slipped out of sight. There was a grinding noise as the door set back in place, followed by more grinding, but it sounded like stone, not metal. The pain began to fade. I cried out to God, to my mother, my father, my friends, everyone. Even if they weren't there, calling out to them helped for some strange reason. It was like I was a kid again, weak, helpless. 2 hours later, before it got dark, I was in my car. I was in pain. Not so much that I wasn't willing to attempt a slow, steady drive home. The bunker door was shut, and I did not dare try opening it again. That pain and the feeling of helplessness was almost a blessing on my way back, because as I walked past the silent lake, through that creepy ghost town, I didn't feel any fear. I didn't care. I was operating on spite alone, an instinct to survive. Those feelings passed after a few days. The physical pain took a lot longer. I was just lucky I kept my job with all the off days I took. I was a mess, and I'm not ashamed to say it. My writing does not do my feelings any justice. My descriptions do not capture what I saw at all. The man that spoke to me looked and spoke to me in a certain way, almost with fondness, nostalgia. It felt like I was a plaything, a toy in his eyes, but a toy he did not want to throw away, a toy he wanted to keep for memory's sake. And being left alone to cry there felt like I was being put out on a shelf in the closet to be dealt with another day. That's the best way I can describe all of this. Opening that door was just pushing the closet open and getting in the way. It was too soon for me to be dealt with, for us to be dealt with. So, back on the shelf I went. And that's how I still feel. I am waiting to find out what happens to me. What happens to us, to our world. One thing's for sure. I now leave abandoned places well alone.